Welcome back to the sky, where space still breathes, and light, though 13 billion years old, has never stopped. Tonight, we speak of a visitor, not because it is brighter than the other stars, but because it seems to be looking back at us. It is called 3I, Atlas, the third interstellar object ever discovered by humans, a mass of ice, dust, and maybe memory. It is passing through our solar system, slowly, silently, but in an orbit so perfect that it makes even the most cautious scientists stop and wonder, is this just a coincidence or a message? Let's slow down, because what is coming will not be the business of the sky, but of us, those who listen to the universe whispering in the language of the dead. For millions of years, the universe has hurled countless comets through the solar system. All of them came and went. Only 3I, Atlas, carries the possibility of staying. When astrophysicist Avi Loeb studied its data, he noticed something that refused to let him look away. On October 29, the object would reach its perihelion, its closest point to the sun, and vanish behind the solar glare, beyond the reach of every telescope on Earth. That moment would be irreversible, a brief instant, yet enough to decide whether 3I, Atlas, would leave the solar system forever, or remain here, a permanent resident under our star. In the darkness of space, motion obeys its rules, but sometimes an object appears that breaks them. 3I, Atlas, was discovered in early 2024 by the Atlas Survey Network in Hawaii, a system built to track comets. But that night, it recorded something unlike anything ever seen. Its orbit stretched over 1 million light-years, its path entering from beyond the Milky Way. It wasn't a fragment of rock. It was a message in motion. Loeb's calculations showed, on the 29th of October 2024, as Atlas approached the sun, it would enter the danger zone, a region where radiation should tear apart an ordinary comet. Instead of disintegrating, 3I, Atlas stabilized its trajectory, a body adjusting its own orbit, as if it knew where safety was. Loeb called it the point of no return, the threshold where the object must choose between two destinies: to drift away into deep space, or to stay, forever bound to the Sunday. In a late September interview, he spoke quietly, almost whispering, "If 3I Atlas performs an orbital break while passing perihelion, it means it knows where the sun is, and it knows how to remain." No one wanted to believe it, but numbers don't lie. Its orbit was tightening. The oscillations of its path matched the sun's gravitational resonance, a precision too perfect to be coincidence. On the night of October 29, 3I, Atlas entered the light. No telescope could see it. Earth, on the far side of the sun, was blind for 4 weeks. That darkness was the only time it could do the unthinkable. Maybe it would continue its flight, depart like every comet before, or it would slow down, letting the sun's gravity catch it, anchoring itself to a new orbit. Some astronomers called this the silent maneuver, a course correction without visible thrust, yet one that could rewrite its fate. Loeb offered no prediction. He said only one thing: if we still see 3I Atlas after November, the solar system will have gained a new resident. On October 29, the universe held its breath. Telescopes went dark. The data stream went silent. Only the sun remained, and something hidden behind its light. No one knew what it was doing, but everyone felt the same quiet certainty. that somewhere in the brilliance where no light escapes, a decision was being made. In the world of astronomers, probability is not just a number. It is the language of the universe, the grammar by which randomness is measured through reason. But sometimes, numbers begin to behave as if they have intent. 3i Atlas was discovered in March 2024 amid thousands of routine observations from the Atlas telescope network in Hawaii. A faint speck of light, moving slowly, coldly, yet the moment its trajectory was plotted, it stood apart. Avi Loeb, astrophysicist at Harvard, calculated the odds of such an object passing through the solar system. The result froze the room once every 10,000 years. In other words, the chance of witnessing 3i Atlas in a single lifetime was lower than winning a national lottery twice in a row. And yet, it appeared, not just appeared, but did so at the exact moment humanity became advanced enough to see it. For over 4 billion years, countless interstellar objects have slipped past unnoticed. And in the first decade that humankind built automated survey networks, one of them showed up, dead center in our field of vision. Loeb doesn't believe in coincidence. He said, if you see someone roll a die and it lands on 6 times in a row, you stop calling it luck. You start asking whether the die has been tampered with. That question ignited a storm of debate, because for scientists, randomness is sacred. It's the foundation of statistics. But 3i Atlas seemed unwilling to obey that foundation. Spectroscopic readings revealed something uncanny. Its reflected light was unnervingly stable, no flicker of spin, no variation typical of comets or tumbling rocks. It behaved as if it were controlling its own reflection. And another detail, its discovery happened at the most favorable position for Earth-based observation. Had it arrived 2 months earlier or 1 month later, we would have missed it completely. Thus, an event with a 1 in 10,000 probability occurred with perfect precision to the day. Loeb began to wonder, if this was random, why did every factor align, as though arranged by intent? He recalculated, changing models, adding variables, accounting for error margins. The result didn't budge. 1 in 10,000 years. A body 33 billion tons in mass, 6 kilometers wide, passing directly through Earth's line of sight, in the one era when we possess instruments sensitive enough to detect it, then halting near the sun, before vanishing into the light. The universe, it seems, does not like coincidences that beautiful. And when a coincidence happens too many times, it stops being coincidence. It becomes a message. That night, Avi Loeb wrote in his notes, if this is randomness, then randomness is behaving like intelligence. When the data from 3i Atlas was compared with that of the 2 previous interstellar visitors, Oumuamua, 2017, and 2i Borisov, 2019, a strange numerical pattern began to emerge. 3 objects, 3 different trajectories, 3 different years, yet all within a single decade. Before that, humanity had watched the skies for centuries and seen nothing like them. By probability, we should detect 1 interstellar object every 10,000 years. So why did 3 of them arrive in less than 10? Avi Loeb called it the paradox of probability. He wrote, if the universe rolls its dice once every 10,000 years, then 3 perfect rolls in 10 years cannot be luck. statisticians agreed. The odds of this occurring naturally were 1 in a trillion, but the numbers did not stop there. 3I. Atlas travels on a path almost perfectly aligned with the ecliptic plane, the flat sheet on which all planets orbit the Sun. For an interstellar object arriving from deep space, that alignment should be practically impossible. Out of millions of possible directions, it chose an inclination of just 0.2 degrees, a match so precise, it nearly mirrors Earth's own orbit. Probability, 1 inch, 20,000. And it didn't just take the right path, it came at the exact moment. Earth was positioned to see it best, a few weeks earlier or later, and we would have missed it entirely. Simulations run millions of times produced the same result. Nearly every model sent the object drifting off course, too early, too late, or too far. Only 1 in a million recreated the real trajectory of 3I Atlas. It didn't just coincide, it chose its moment, the one window when the only intelligent observers in the system could notice. Loeb said, if this was coincidence, it was intentional coincidence, like someone stepping into frame just as the camera turned on. The numbers had stopped being cold. They had started telling a story of something aiming directly toward the one planet, capable of asking what it was, in the one era when that planet could finally see. Astronomers tried to steady themselves with reason. They said, perhaps it's still random, a cosmic lottery win. But Loeb replied, winning once is luck. Winning 3 times in a row, you should check the machine. No one argued. The room went silent, because everyone knew data doesn't lie. It only waits for courage. And somewhere, hidden in the noise of chance, 3I Atlas was whispering a question. If the universe truly obeys statistics, who, then, is bending the math? When 3I Atlas was fed into orbital simulation models, the computers produced thousands of trajectories. None of them matched what was actually happening in space. According to classical physics, a comet approaching the sun should accelerate, then slingshot outward along a parabolic path, never to return. But 3I Atlas behaved differently. It kept a steady velocity, neither speeding up nor slowing down, adjusting only its flight angle by fractions of a degree, as if an unseen hand were fine-tuning its course. Researchers from Cambridge, Harvard, and ESA added every conceivable variable: solar radiation pressure, particle collisions, gas jet thrust, and still nothing fit. Its trajectory was too stable for any known cometary behavior. In a May report, one analysis team wrote bluntly, "No existing model explains its motion." The numbers had crossed a line. Physics still held true, but it no longer felt sufficient. Pause. If you've stayed with this far, take a moment, subscribe, and like this video. It helps keep stories like these alive, told slowly, warmly, and close enough for you to feel the mystery breathing between the facts. Because this is still the same question: how small data points can shift the way we see the entire universe. Back to 3I Atlas. After thousands of simulation runs, only one model matched observation, a scenario in which the object could adjust its own orbital energy. No one dared to publish that claim outright, but everyone knew what it implied. If true, 3I Atlas wasn't merely reacting to the sun, it was responding to it. Even stranger was the distribution of its energy output. There was no measurable loss of mass, yet its brightness fluctuated in precise repeating cycles, more like a controlled system than a natural reaction. Scientists gave it a name: anomalous phase lock, a state in which an object synchronizes its internal rhythm with the gravitational field around it. Not random, coordinated. If it's a natural body, then it's behaving as if it knows how to balance itself in space. If not, then it's performing a maneuver that humanity has only begun to replicate inside quantum laboratories. In the quiet nights over Hawaii, as 3I Atlas faded from the telescopes, astronomers were left with a single unsettling question: is this a comet or a test the universe has set for us? Before we go further, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you want to follow me deeper into the dim edges of the cosmos, places untouched by light, where every small piece of data can change the way we understand ourselves. Thank you for listening and for believing that science, too, can be gentle. In science, faith is rarely spoken of, yet it hides behind every equation. When data refuses to fit, we bend the models, adjust the constants, and tell ourselves the universe is still predictable. Because if order collapses, so does meaning. When Avi Loeb published his first report on 3I Atlas, he never said it was artificial. He simply wrote, "The data do not match the profile of a natural comet." That single sentence split the universe in two. On one side, those who believe that everything can be explained by classical physics. On the other, silence, but in that silence, their eyes changed. Not everyone is ready to accept that the world might operate under rules no one ever taught us. The belief in randomness has become the comfort of modern reason. It promises safety. Everything can be measured. Everything can be known. But with 3I Atlas, the numbers themselves began to crack. Loeb said, "Science is not here to protect our peace of mind. It exists to teach us how to live with uncertainty." Visignators, in the several plays so mind time stating and Rezard, perhaps 3I Atlas, is more than an anomaly. Perhaps it is a psychological experiment, a mirror held up to our collective mind, showing that even science, our most objective language, trembles before the unknown. We are not just observing the universe, we are watching the edges of our own understanding and seeing where it begins to break. There are moments when data stops obeying theory. 3I Atlas is one of those moments. When observatories compared its orbital tracks, they found tiny, deliberate shifts, not random noise, not instrument error. Every sign suggested the object was responding to its surroundings. Some scientists tried to frame it as coincidence, but the statistics refused to agree. Each minute deviation in its path occurred precisely when it needed to, as if to keep the orbit balanced. If that's chance, then it's a kind of intentional chance. Avi Loeb put it simply. When data begins to behave as if it has awareness, we must accept the possibility that awareness may hide within the data itself. No one argued, because everyone understood. This was no longer about a comet. It was about the limits of knowing. From that moment, humanity's view of the universe shifted, not as a machine, but as a mind, one that was now looking back. And 3I Atlas, with its paradoxical stillness, became proof that the cosmos does not always follow probability. Sometimes it chooses its moment, just to make us ask why. When 3I Atlas vanished behind the sun's corona, every instrument fell silent. But that silence weighed more than all the data humanity had ever gathered, because everything had been too perfect to be random. Avi Loeb once said, "If the dice always land on 6, we can't keep calling it luck." That line stopped the scientific world cold, not in defiance, but in quiet recognition that sometimes the impossible is simply a law we haven't yet named. And then came the lingering question, not why, but who? Who is rolling the dice? Some distant intelligence, or the universe itself, testing its own capacity for awareness? Maybe 3I Atlas was only an experiment, a way for the cosmos to see if humanity was lucid enough to realize it was being asked a question. If that's true, then every time we look up at the night sky, we are not just observing the universe, we are playing its game, a game without reward, without victory, only awareness. And in that game, as the dice keep falling, perhaps the only thing we're truly meant to learn is when to ask the right question. After weeks hidden behind the sun's corona, 3I Atlas reappeared. Not in a blaze of light, but through a stream of data that left the entire astronomical community in silence. The first readings came in. Brightness, constant. Velocity, almost unchanged. And most striking of all, its actual mass, over 33 billion tons. No one believed it at first. An interstellar object only a few kilometers wide shouldn't weigh that much. By every law of physics, it should have been torn apart by the sun's gravity, shattered by radiation, reduced to dust. But it wasn't. 3I Atlas remained whole. Avi Loeb wrote in his first report, "We are observing an object of immense mass that moves more gracefully than any model predicts." A simple sentence, heavy with implication. Something that massive should distort space itself, yet it drifted through planetary orbits without causing so much as a ripple. Loeb compared it to an iceberg gliding across the ocean without making a single wave. Spectral analyses from Hubble and James Webb confirmed it. No exhaust, no mass loss, no spin instability, just perfect equilibrium. So perfect it defied belief, so perfect it implied design. If it were hollow, it should collapse. If solid, its trajectory should shift. Neither happened. 3I Atlas existed in what physics calls a dynamically impossible state, and yet it endured. One scientist at JPL wrote in a private note, "If this is natural, then nature has learned how to regulate gravity." After that, the nickname spread quietly through observatories, the object that balances itself, because there was only one conclusion left to draw. Either 3I Atlas was engineered, or the universe, by some strange recursion, had accidentally created a masterpiece of its own intelligence. Whichever it was, the number 33 billion tons remained, heavy as a full stop in an unfinished equation, silent, as if waiting to be understood. Right after the mass of 3I Atlas was confirmed, a simple question turned unbearable. If it was that heavy, why did it still hold its shape? If solid, it should have fractured. If hollow, it should have collapsed. So what was it? No one had a definitive answer. All the telescopes could agree on one thing only: the object was too stable. Its reflected light wasn't chaotic, not the uneven shimmer of a comet. but rhythmic, a pulse, a cycle, as if its surface had been engineered to modulate energy instead of merely endure it. Some researchers murmured, maybe it's a structure, not a rock. And so the phrase emerged, the designed object. No one dared confirm it, but no one could dismiss it either, because sometimes what makes an object suspicious isn't how it moves, but how perfectly it exists. 3i, Atlas stood between nature and engineering, as though born from both, and in its silence, one unmistakable feeling lingered, that somewhere inside that mass was something far beyond stone, something closer to a design still functioning. 3i, Atlas traveled through space on an almost perfect path. No wobble, no drift, just a smooth, unwavering line, as if drawn between two worlds. By every physical model, an object of such immense mass should tremble, bend, or buckle under the pull of gravity and radiation, but it didn't. Each time solar pressure shifted, it adjusted, barely perceptibly, like something balancing itself. No thrust, no wheel, just a steady rhythm of motion, so precise it left astronomers silent. Someone in the research team wrote, "It moves as if it's pre-programmed." The line sounded technical, but also strangely meditative. Perhaps only what knows where it's going can move through space that quietly. Avi Loeb suggested that Atlas might be maintaining an internal force equilibrium, a self-coordinated gravitational balance. But if that were true, then it wasn't a comet anymore. It was a system, a massive object, yet maneuvering with more precision than any human satellite. Not propelled by force, but by purpose. Maybe it needed no pilot. Maybe its structure was the pilot. Looking at that trajectory, we don't just see a path, we see a decision, a calm, deliberate persistence that could not have come from chance. And in the deep silence of space, that kind of intention is far more unsettling than any radio signal could ever be. At the same moment, the two greatest eyes of humankind turned toward the same point in the dark. Hubble, old, patient, steady, watching invisible light. James Webb, young, precise, and silent, seeing in the long breath of the infrared. Both saw the same thing. 3i, Atlas was pulsing, not brightly, just a faint, measured shimmer, so regular it felt like breathing. Its light curve beat with the exact frequency that Earth had detected in the plasma field around Mars, 2 points separated by hundreds of millions of kilometers, yet moving to one rhythm. No comet had ever done that. No natural body had ever held such stability. The scientists merely recorded it. They didn't comment. They knew that any explanation would circle back to an impossible idea. The object was synchronizing. Loeb wrote privately, "If 3i, Atlas absorbs light the way a living organism does, then perhaps it's communicating, just not in a language we recognize, and it kimsas." The note was never published, but it moved quietly through the research networks. Because everyone understood what they were witnessing was not randomness, but response. Between the two eyes of humanity, 3i Atlas didn't merely reflect, it answered. And perhaps, for the first time in history, light sent from two directions returned in a single shared heartbeat. When data from Hubble and James Webb were compared, something undeniable emerged. Every measurable property of 3i Atlas displayed an unnatural consistency. Its reflectivity, its rotation rate, its light cycle, all behaved like variables inside a single system. It was no longer rock, no longer ice. It was a structure with logic. Avi Loeb used a strange phrase, mass as code. Aster was 7 times never. According to him, the mass of Atlas might not be incidental. It might be programmed, a balancing parameter built into the object's design. If true, that would mean the object wasn't merely existing. It was operating. Simulations suggested that with such perfect internal distribution, it could remain stable for thousands of years, without external energy input, a self-sustaining mechanism, reacting only when the right condition appears. No one knows what that condition is. It could be light, it could be magnetic fields, or simply observation. In their private notes, scientists began writing a single word beside its name, construct. No one called it a comet anymore. They avoided the word intelligence, yet quietly admitted every feature of Atlas was too coherent to be coincidence, as if someone, far away, had sent it not to speak, but to pose a question, a mass that is also a message, a design disguised as matter, a problem not meant to be solved, but to whisper. Do you understand what it means? To stand before the trace of a thought? 33 billion tons. A number that refuses to grow lighter. But perhaps what makes 3I Atlas heavy isn't its matter, but the meaning it carries. In physics, mass is a measure of attraction. Anything massive bends the space around it. But in the cosmos, meaning has gravity too. It pulls awareness closer. It bends the way we perceive reality. Maybe 3I Atlas is nothing more than a cold shard of ice. Or maybe it is a memory made physical, an orbit built to outlive every civilization, an object sent not to arrive, but to be recognized. Avi Loeb wrote in a quiet note, perhaps the universe doesn't hide its secrets. It only waits to see how ready we are to understand them. 33 billion tons, a lifeless number, until curiosity looks at it, and it becomes a mirror for the weight of our own thought. And in that mirror appears a paradox. The more massive it is in matter, the lighter it feels in intent. It doesn't press on space. It opens a question in the mind. Perhaps the true gravity of 3I Atlas is not in the space it occupies, but in the void it leaves within us, where every label, comet, construct, or message dissolves into a single thing, the silence that has weight. In the universe, there are no straight lines. Every orbit is born of collision, too of pull and perturbation. But 3I Atlas moved along a path too flawless to be called random. From the moment it left interstellar space, it crossed 3 worlds, Mars, Venus, and Jupiter, at angles almost mathematically perfect. Not early, not late. Each encounter occurred precisely when the planet's gravity could redirect it without costing energy. To scientists, it was like watching a knife thrown through 3 spinning rings and not missing once. Avi Loeb said, if the dice keep landing on 6, you have to ask whether the dice are rigged. The sentence sounded light, but it carried the full weight of scientific unease. By calculation, the odds of 3I Atlas following such a trajectory were 1 in 20,000, a ratio so absurdly small that any statistician would dismiss it as noise. But when noise repeats 3 times in a row, it stops being noise. The precision of Atlas lay not in its numbers, but in its rhythm. It moved as if obeying a score, a music of gravity, of light, of silence. No other object ever recorded has followed such a pattern. Even humanity's most precise probes couldn't achieve deviations that small. Each planetary flyby altered its velocity just enough to continue, never overshooting, never stalling, as though it knew how to play gravity like an instrument, not fight it as resistance. NASA's readings showed that at every encounter, Atlas adjusted its trajectory by less than 0.02 degrees, an error margin so tight it could only occur if the path were pre-computed. No engines, no thrust signatures, but unmistakable intent in motion, and that, more than anything, is what unsettled the astronomical world. An object that sends no radio signals, emits no visible pattern, yet behaves as if it knows exactly where it's going. In a note to his colleagues, Loeb wrote, "No need for transmission. The orbit itself is the language." Perhaps he was right, because when a body passes 3 planets with perfect precision, it isn't merely traveling, it's speaking through its movement. Nothing unsettles the human mind more than numbers that don't fit. When theory says impossible, and the universe quietly proves otherwise, the very idea of order begins to tremble. Probability is how we reassure ourselves that reality still has rules, that everything happens for a reason, and that patience will one day solve every mystery. But 3I Atlas made that faith fragile. The chance for an interstellar object to pass through Mars, Venus, and Jupiter at precisely the right moments, to slingshot around their gravity wells without collision, is 1 in 20,000. Avi Loeb recalculated again and again. The result didn't change. He said, "If this is coincidence, then the universe just rolled 6 sixes in a row." No one argued. The numbers spoke for themselves. 3 encounters, 3 impossibly perfect alignments. If this is luck, then luck is behaving like intelligence. Because when the impossible keeps happening, we're no longer talking about probability. We're staring at intention. Thousands of simulations were run. Every single one agreed. Atlas curved flawlessly. No deviation, no noise, as if its path had been written in advance, and the object was simply following the score. One researcher wrote dryly in his logbook, "If this is coincidence, then coincidence just earned an aerospace degree." The line spread fast, not for its humor, but for its truth. Science had reached the edge of what it could still call random. Maybe the universe didn't need to break its own laws. Maybe it only needed to rearrange possibilities, just enough to see if humanity would notice. Because when probability falls to nearly 0, and the event still happens, you are no longer witnessing an occurrence. You are being shown something. When the orbital data of 3I Atlas was compiled, something strange appeared. Each time it passed near a planet, its velocity and trajectory shifted, just enough to keep its course stable. No thrusters, no gravitational tugouts, only subtle, deliberate corrections. So precise they felt intentional. It wasn't random chaos. It looked like a feedback system, a mechanism that sensed, adjusted, and responded. Scientists called it anomalous stabilization, a phenomenon of impossible balance, an object sailing through immense gravitational fields, yet remaining perfectly poised. Avi Loeb wrote in his summary, 3I Atlas doesn't resist gravity, it uses it, as if the object understood the laws and knew exactly how to lean into them, not fighting the universe, but flowing with its rhythm. Earth-based and orbital observatories confirmed the same thing. Its micro-adjustments weren't random. They followed a cycle, ordered, periodic, like a metronome tuned to celestial mechanics. No one dared speak the word intelligence, but everyone sensed it. To sustain such refinement, Something inside must be listening. A feedback core, a remote control, or a self-regulating system. Whatever it is, it means TRA's Atlas's path wasn't just set, it was maintained. Loeb refused to speculate further. At a Harvard discussion, he said simply, "We're watching an object that knows how to move, by the rules, not against them. And perhaps that's why it still exists. It doesn't struggle with space. It moves within it, as if the cosmos itself were its vessel. At that level, it stops being just an object. It becomes a principle, the principle of intelligence itself. The art of keeping balance between nature and intention. At a certain threshold, probability stops explaining anything. When precision becomes perfect, we are no longer standing in the realm of chance, but in the realm of intention. 3I Atlas moves as if its orbit were pre-drawn. Every intersection, every curve, lands on beat as though someone had composed the motion long ago. Statistics collapse into silence, because when the probability of something approaches zero, and it still happens, we must consider the possibility that the universe itself is quietly rewriting the rules. Chance and purpose differ by only one thing: awareness. And sometimes awareness doesn't reveal itself through action, but through precision. 3I Atlas sends no signal, yet its trajectory is a message, a reply spoken through the perfect repetition of numbers. If it is natural, then nature is acting with uncanny intelligence, and if it isn't, then someone or something has learned to speak through probability itself. Perhaps this is neither accident nor design, but the thin line where both dissolve, where the universe plays just to see whether we are paying attention. On the map of the solar system, interstellar objects are supposed to be drifters, arriving from random directions, passing through, and vanishing back into the dark. But 3I Atlas refused to behave that way. When the data was compared, a strange pattern emerged. Oumuamua, 2017, 2I, Borisov, 2019, and 3I, Atlas, 2024. 3 visitors, separated by a few years, all sharing nearly flat orbital inclinations, less than 5 degrees off the ecliptic, and entering the system at almost identical speeds. No one expected such delicate repetition. If these objects truly came from random galactic directions, the chance they would align within the same narrow orbital band is less than 1 in 10 million. The numbers began to whisper of orbital harmonics, a hidden rhythm nature doesn't often compose. It didn't look like random perturbation, but like resonance, as if the solar system were being visited on a measured schedule. Astrophysicists know, in the cosmos, resonance is never trivial. Planets have rotation cycles. Stars pulse in predictable modes. Now, perhaps even the interstellar guests follow a timing larger than themselves. Maybe it's coincidence, or maybe it's deliberate maintenance, a kind of physical signal not sent by radio, but by motion itself. Most unsettling of all was the timing. Each object was discovered precisely when human observation technology had just become sensitive enough to find it. Not earlier, not later, as if there were synchronization between human advancement and whatever is arriving from beyond. Researchers called it temporal synchronization, a rare phenomenon where 2 independent systems beat in the same rhythm. If that's chance, then chance is acting with intent. And if it's not, then we may live in a rhythmic universe, one that sends its messages through geometry and time, not words or waves. No declarations, No transmissions, just recurring orbits, precise enough to make us stop, listen, and wonder whether this is coincidence or the cosmos quietly replaying an old theme, waiting for us to be still enough to hear it. Everything surrounding 3I, Atlas, ultimately folds back to the same point: precision beyond possibility. 3 perfect flybys, an orbit so stable it borders on paradox. A repeating pattern among interstellar visitors, so exact that randomness itself starts to feel paper-thin. Perhaps this isn't design, nor coincidence. Perhaps it is the universe's own reflex, a self-regulating mechanism on a cosmic scale, moving slowly, subtly, and with a precision far exceeding anything humanity has ever called intelligence. When gravity, radiation, and matter find perfect balance, we don't just witness mechanics, we witness meaning. Just as the human body keeps its own heartbeat, the universe may be maintaining its own rhythm. Objects like Atlas could be the visible pulses of a vast, self-correcting process, where every oscillation has purpose and every deviation is merely a moment of repair. Avi Loeb once said that when probability becomes too small to explain, we shouldn't search for another reason. We should accept that the universe is revealing a higher principle. Maybe these refinements are not the acts of some external mind, but the way existence keeps itself intact, a system that learns, adjusts, and refuses to collapse. No architect, no overseer, only an operation that knows how to stay in balance, a quiet choreography of persistence. If 3I, Atlas is part of that design, then it isn't a message to humankind, but a reminder whispered by the cosmos to itself. Everything still works. And in that instant when we look up, watching a silent body drift between planets, perhaps what we truly witness isn't a flying stone at all, but the inner intelligence of space itself, tuning its own rhythm like an endless piece of music, playing softly across eternity. In the dark ocean of space, light usually follows a simple rule. It spreads, it reflects, it fades. But 3I Atlas broke that rule. When the Hubble telescope first caught sight of it, the object didn't glow like a comet. No sweeping tail, no plume of plasma spilling behind it. Instead, a concentrated beam of light appeared in front of it, facing the Sunday, as if the reflection didn't scatter outward, but turned back against its source. Astronomers named it the forward reflection anomaly. The reasons, a phenomenon so rare, it only appears when a surface is unnaturally uniform, like a mirror or a crystalline lattice arranged with mathematical precision. No natural comet behaves that way. Dust and gas are always pushed backward by solar radiation, sending light away from the Sunday. But Atlas defied that logic. It shone directly toward the light. Hubble's images showed a narrow, focused streak, a brilliant spear of reflection aimed straight at the Sunday. At first, scientists blamed sensor error. Then other telescopes confirmed the same result. That forced them to rewrite the hypothesis, because if light reflects with intention, the surface must be designed to make it happen. Some argued it was just geometry, a quirk of angles or symmetry, but the data refused to agree. The brightness remained constant for days, unchanged by rotation or observation point, which means no matter where it was viewed from, 3I Atlas kept shining in the same direction, as if it knew where it was looking. No one dared call it behavior, yet scientific language began to fail. When reflection gains purpose, a mirror stops being an object and becomes a messenger. That light wasn't just physics. It carried rhythm. It carried repetition. It carried the haunting sense that somewhere the universe was trying to respond in the only language it has ever known, light. Maybe it was chance. Maybe it was code. Because in space, light always tries to say something. We simply haven't yet learned how to listen. Comets usually betray themselves when they near the sunday. Ice sublimates, gas erupts, dust scatters behind, and a long luminous tail unfurls, a bright scar of matter coming apart. But 3I, Atlas, refused to unravel. No flare, no jetting gas, no trail of plasma. It remained bright, yet its brightness stood still. It didn't spread, didn't stretch under solar pressure. Astronomers waited for a tail. None appeared. The telescope saw only a fixed halo of light, as though the object had stopped obeying the sunday. In physics, that's impossible. Nothing so close to a star escapes the pull of plasma and radiation. Yet Atlas kept its optical shape for weeks, untouched, unchanged. No tail, yet luminous, as if it were shining from within, not by reflection, but through a self-sustaining energy. The field gave it a name: internal emission anomaly, a body emitting light without external cause. If that glow came from its interior, then 3I, Atlas, was no comet. It was a controlled light source. Spectral analysis confirmed the suspicion. Its emission peaks clustered in the blue and violet ranges, wavelengths often tied to engineered plasma or guided ionization. And so, a cautious hypothesis was born. Perhaps Atlas wasn't reflecting light at all, but producing it deliberately. It needed no tail, for it wasn't dissolving. It needed no mirror, for it was its own beacon. If that's true, then 3I. Atlas isn't a passive object in sunlight, but an active participant in light itself, using illumination as its medium, not its byproduct. Its silence is no longer stillness, but equilibrium, a steadiness so perfect that decay, loss, and heat all lose meaning. And within that immaculate calm, one feels something uncanny, that the object is not merely traveling through light, but living inside it. When the light of 3I, Atlas, was split into its spectrum, the numbers stood out sharp, undeniable. Like ink marks on the black skin of space, the light was deep green, a shade rarely seen in comets. It didn't diffuse or fade. It stayed tight, steady, coherent, as if managed by a single unified source. In astrophysics, green light usually points to ionized carbon dioxide CO2 mice. But here, the ratio broke every rule. 2 measured 8 times higher than water vapor. That's unheard of. Comets are dominated by ice. As they near the sun, water sublimates. Gas expands. Dust erupts, forming a tail. But 3I, ATLS, had no tail, no vapor, no fountain of ice, only CO2, a gas that resists freezing, yet somehow reigned supreme. It didn't make sense. An interstellar traveler from the cold should not be drenched in carbon dioxide. And yet, the data refused to lie. Some suggested that Atlas might wear a thick skin of dry ice, absorbing solar energy and pulsing it back in rhythmic bursts. But to sustain an 8-to-1 ratio in such conditions, the surface would need to reproduce CO2 molecules continuously. Nature doesn't do that. Controlled chemistry does. And at that point, the conversation slipped beyond the comfort zone of ordinary physics. If 3I, Atlas, truly regenerates its CO2, it isn't a comet. It's a closed chemical system, a body with its own internal energy loop. Its structure resembles that of a solar absorption device, converting heat into chemical reaction, then radiating light at fixed frequencies. A body that reacts, adjusts, and sustains itself. A mechanism, not a fragment. The field coined a name for it: chemical coherence. Not just the behavior of matter, but the behavior of behavior. 3I. Atlas didn't wish to disintegrate. It wished to endure. It didn't reflect light. It produced it on its own terms. Somewhere in the darkness, a solitary object glowed not to illuminate, but to prove that it was awake. And perhaps that green light wasn't the color of gas at all, but the signal of a system remembering how to function. At 4.4 astronomical units, sunlight is little more than a whisper, less than 5% of what reaches Earth. Temperatures there fall so low that every ordinary comet would still be asleep. But in that frozen silence, 3I Atlas woke up. Telescopes caught it flaring. A sudden rise in brightness, jets of gas escaping from a surface too cold for anything to sublimate. No heat, no pressure, yet movement. As if someone had pressed a hidden start button, physics had no room for it. No external force could explain the reaction. Only one possibility remained. The energy came from within. 3I. Atlas wasn't awakened. It awakened itself. Scientists called it premature activation, but the word premature felt wrong. It wasn't early, it was intentional. Because if an object can react where reactions shouldn't happen, then perhaps it understands its environment. Infrared data confirmed a steady thermal pulse, a faint heartbeat of heat that grew stronger as the object approached the sunday. Not an outburst, not combustion, a measured escalation. This wasn't random chemistry. It was energy regulation. At 4.4 AU, where sunlight is too weak to stir dust or melt ice, Atlas chose that moment to begin, as if it knew it would need time to prepare for what came next. No external trigger, no signal, no impact, only a rhythmic change in brightness, a quiet countdown written in light. Its behavior felt programmed, yet there was no trace of machinery. It was as though the universe itself was using its own matter to perform an act of intent. 3I, Atlas, became more than a comet. It became a metaphor for self-awareness without circuitry, for intelligence born from pattern, not design. It did not wait for the sun to command it. It simply knew when to begin. When the light of 3I, Atlas, was analyzed over time, researchers noticed something unexpected. Its reflectivity wasn't constant. It fluctuated slowly, following the rhythm of the object's own thermal cycle. The surface didn't merely scatter light, it seemed to regulate the amount of light it reflected. The phenomenon became known as adaptive reflectance. In modern technology, we can only replicate such behavior using nanomaterials or intelligent composite coatings. Yet here it was, occurring naturally on an interstellar traveler. The outer shell of 3I, Atlas, behaved like a feedback system. When sunlight intensified, its reflectance dropped. When light dimmed, it grew brighter. A near-perfect thermal regulation mechanism, keeping the object from ever becoming too hot or too cold. If this is a natural phenomenon, then nature has learned to design materials with memory, and if not, then it's the work of an intelligence that speaks through matter itself. Models suggest that if the entire surface acts as a reactive network, the object could maintain a stable energy state for thousands of years, without any external supply. Not by consuming energy, but by redistributing it, a kind of static equilibrium, simple yet flawless. Hubble's imagery showed the surface light of Atlas, not diffused, but smooth, like still water in darkness. A light without scattering, without noise, only depth, as if it were reflecting from within. The scientific community fell silent. No hypothesis fit. Everything about it was too precise, too deliberate to be random. That shell did more than reflect. It regulated, not a mirror, but a passive nervous system, a mechanism that required no computation, yet preserved the stability of the whole. 3I. Atlas seemed to understand how to exist between energy and matter, between light and shadow. It chose neither side. It simply balanced both. And perhaps that is what makes it extraordinary. Not its shape, but its ability to respond to the universe through silence, never resisting, never absorbing too much, only adjusting just enough to endure. Like an ancient life form that long ago learned how to survive without changing at all. From the beginning, humanity has used light to understand the universe. But perhaps light was never only for us to see with, it was also the way the universe learns to see us. 3I. Atlas never spoke. It sent no radio signals, used no language we could translate. It simply reflected, glowed, and remained silent. And yet, within that silence, there was structure, a rhythm, a pulse, a kind of order that turned light from a force of physics into a form of language. Each time Atlas reflected light, it seemed to send information, not to someone, but to the very space that contained it. A simple act. Light leaves, then returns. But between those two moments, the universe learns a little more about itself. Perhaps 3I, Atlas, carries no mission at all. Perhaps it simply does what the cosmos has done since its first dawn. It looks at itself through light. For us, light is something to chase. For the universe, light is something to remember. Each reflection is a memory, each resonance, a heartbeat of ancient awareness. If there exists such a thing as universal intelligence, it likely doesn't speak in words, but in spectra, in colors no ear can hear, only consciousness can feel. 3I. Atlas, with its adaptive skin and its light aimed back toward the sun, might be a fragment of that language, a lone symbol in an infinite manuscript written in starlight. And we, by chance, have read just one line. Maybe every object in the universe is speaking. We simply haven't yet learned how to listen to light, because sometimes the language of the cosmos needs no letters, no sound, only light patient enough to reach our eyes. And in that moment, in the cold vastness, we realize light does not just fall upon matter, it awakens memory. It reminds us that the universe and ourselves were never separate, just two directions of the same ancient beam of light. As 3I, Atlas continues its journey, the data it returns is no longer simple. It is not merely a collection of numbers, but a sequence of paradoxes challenging every existing theory. It cannot be called a comet because it does not behave like one. It cannot be called an asteroid because its density and reflectivity don't align. Nor can it be called a spacecraft, for there is no clear sign of technology to prove it. Amid endless debates, Avi Loeb proposed something bold: the Loeb scale, a measure for estimating the likelihood that an object may have a technological origin. Instead of asking, is it natural or artificial, The Loeb scale asks only one thing: how likely is the presence of intelligence here? From 0 to 10. 0 means entirely natural. 10 means certainly artificial. 3i. Atlas falls somewhere between 5 and 6. Not enough evidence to confirm, but too anomalous to explain away as natural. At that level, the object stands between two realms: physics and intent, chance and structure. Loeb does not call this proof. He calls it the threshold of perception, a gray zone where humanity must admit that its old frameworks no longer suffice. The Loeb scale is more than a measuring tool. It is an invitation, a reminder to scientists that not everything irrational is wrong, and not everything measurable is true. When 3i Atlas was placed upon this scale, it became the first object recognized as a potential candidate for extraterrestrial technology without any mechanical evidence. It transmits no signals, yet its data alone shakes the foundation of how we define natural, because sometimes nature itself may be the technology of the universe. In its silence, 3i Atlas compels us to reconsider what we mean by intelligence. Perhaps intelligence needs no form, no consciousness, only the capacity to preserve order amid chaos. In most searches for extraterrestrial intelligence, humanity has always waited for something unmistakable: a radio transmission, a laser pulse, a deliberately encoded message. But 3i Atlas sends nothing, only data, only behavior, and that is precisely what led Avi Loeb to ask, have we been looking in the wrong direction? If a civilization were advanced enough to send an object across the stars, would it really need to use electromagnetic waves? A medium so primitive, so easily drowned in the cosmic background noise? Perhaps the real signal isn't in the waves, but in the way the object behaves. From that idea, Loeb proposed a new approach: to read data as language. Instead of searching for a transmission, observe patterns of behavior that defy natural explanation. That, he said, is the foundation of the Loeb scale. At the lower levels, an object simply obeys the ordinary laws of physics: its orbit, reflection, velocity. But when the data begins to show fine-tuned adjustments, unnatural stability, or synchronized precision beyond probability, its technological level rises. And 3i Atlas, with its mirrored light curve, its asymmetric chemical ratios, its impossibly accurate trajectory, reaches the middle range of the scale, 5 to 6, a half-natural, half-shaped entity, as if the universe and intelligence co-authored its design. Loeb calls this the trace of hidden thought, a form of intelligence that communicates not through language, but through statistically impossible coherence. In this view, even something as simple as maintaining a stable orbit can be a form of message. Not, I am here, but I understand your laws. In the silence between numbers, 3i Atlas leaves something like the grammar of motion. It does not speak, yet every parameter has rhythm. Each oscillation, each flicker of reflection becomes a punctuation mark in the text of space. Human beings are used to searching for meaning in noise, but forget that the universe itself has always spoken in patterns. Loeb believes 3i Atlas doesn't need to send a signal. It is the signal. Science always begins with doubt, but sometimes it is doubt itself that becomes the wall, keeping us from seeing what stands right before our eyes. 3i Atlas is the perfect example. All the data are real. All the measurements are precise. Yet instead of asking, why does it behave this way? Most researchers ask, how could it possibly behave this way? A subtle shift in wording, but enough to change the entire direction of thought. Skepticism is essential, but taken to the extreme, it becomes a filter of perception. Any fact that defies expectation gets discarded simply because it's hard to believe. The universe could be stranger than what we were taught. Loeb once said, when you get used to seeing the sky through an equation, you begin to see only the equation and not the sky. 3. Atlas forces us to confront that. It doesn't fit any known definition, and because of that, it compels science to ask, can precision itself imply intent? And can silence be the highest form of communication? Such questions are not easy to voice. In academia, anything unproven is labeled speculation. And between speculation and discovery, the real distance is not in the data, but in the courage to accept new possibilities. 3. Atlas does not break the laws of physics. It merely bends them into something more flexible. It does not oppose physics. It expands its frontier. And that, perhaps, is what makes it unsettling. Because every time the universe reveals a new layer, we must accept that we were wrong before. Science is the art of being wrong, again and again. And yet, humans fear that more than the dark itself. Perhaps what makes 3 Atlas truly significant is not where it came from, but what it forces us to reconsider, how we decide what is real. When the boundaries of skepticism begin to crack, science does not lose its precision. It rediscovers its curiosity, the very impulse that first made humanity look up at the stars. Every definition of intelligence begins with difference. We call something intelligent when it acts with intention, when it calculates, when it creates an outcome that rises above chance. But if the universe already contains within itself every law, every symmetry, every rule, and if those rules can rearrange themselves to preserve order, then is intelligence still the privilege of life? 3 Atlas makes that question unavoidable. It sends no signal, no message, and yet it behaves with a precision beyond anything humans have ever built. No randomness, no chaos, only an elegance that seems naturally calculated. If that is true, then perhaps design is only a stage in nature's own evolution, a moment when matter realizes that existence is not merely a consequence, but a choice. From that perspective, Atlas needs no creator. It could be the outcome of billions of years of refinement. Nature learning to conserve energy, to maintain balance, and ultimately, to think through form. Humans call this technology. But to the universe, it may simply be survival. At a higher level of complexity, a planet that regulates its own atmosphere, a star that stabilizes its fusion to avoid collapse, an object that reflects light in perfect rhythm. Each is a form of intelligence, not a conscious intelligence, but a reflective one. The intelligence of systems. When a structure becomes too perfect to fail, we call it equilibrium. But when it adapts to preserve that equilibrium, we are witnessing the first gesture of thought. Perhaps the universe did not create life to give birth to intelligence. Perhaps the universe is intelligence, learning to express itself through countless forms. Comets, planets, or people. If 3 Atlas belongs to that process, then it is neither technology nor nature. It is the intersection, the point where the two converge, and intelligence becomes a physical property, like gravity or light. Maybe every planet, every photon, is participating in the same equation, the equation of a universe, learning itself. When 3I Atlas crossed the orbit of Mars, the scientific community began to sense that this was moving beyond the bounds of a mere experiment. It was no longer just a story of astronomy. It had become a story about humanity's collective consciousness. Avi Loeb proposed an idea: to establish an international organization dedicated to monitoring interstellar objects, not to hunt for aliens, but to learn how to respond to what has never happened before. In his view, when humanity first encounters an object that might bear the trace of intelligence, the instinctive reaction should not be skepticism, but structured observation, because science can only survive when it separates fear from curiosity. Such an organization, Loeb said, would not belong to any single nation. It would act as Earth's collective sensory system, an institution without weapons, without prejudice, with only one mission: to keep human intellect calm when the universe begins to speak. He argued that humanity already has the United Nations, to preserve peace on Earth, but not yet a united planets, a cosmic counterpart, to preserve understanding among different forms of intelligence. There must be a system for deep space monitoring, a network of telescopes and sensors capable of rapid response, so that whenever an object like 3I Atlas appears, we not only know where it comes from, but also how to react. This is not about fear, but awareness, the awareness that we are not alone in the pursuit of understanding, and that the unknown is never as frightening as our refusal to face it. Loeb believes that if another intelligence exists out there, they will judge us, not by our technology, but by how we confront what we do not yet understand. Thus, such a monitoring system is not merely a scientific tool, it is a moral test of our civilization. Just as the first telescope once taught humanity that Earth was not the center of the universe, an interstellar observatory could one day remind us that humanity is not the center of intelligence. Perhaps 3I Atlas carries no message at all, but its very arrival has already forced us to reorganize how we look at the cosmos, a simple yet evolutionary act, to stop waiting for a signal and learn at last to listen. Since the moment humanity first looked up at the sky, every journey of discovery has begun with a question: are we alone? A question not only for the universe, but for ourselves. 3I Atlas may be the answer, not through words, not through signals, but through its mere existence. Its arrival compels humanity to prepare for a new phase, one no longer grounded in belief, but in cognitive responsibility. If one day the universe truly sends a visitor endowed with intelligence, will we be mature enough to listen? Can we set aside the instinct of fear and recognize difference as a reflection of ourselves? Avi Loeb does not speak of faith. He speaks of readiness, readiness to observe without judgment, readiness to learn without possession, readiness to become the student of another form of intelligence. If such intelligence truly exists, perhaps 3I Atlas did not come to warn or to save. Perhaps it came only to ask, are you ready to understand? A simple question, yet powerful enough to divide the history of science between those still searching for proof and those who have learned to perceive through silence. The universe is not distant. It merely demands that humanity become more subtle. For sometimes, the wonder lies not in discovering something new, but in relearning how to be astonished. If there is indeed a civilization out there watching us, perhaps they too are wondering, has humanity learned to listen yet? And maybe when we begin to observe the skies not out of curiosity, but out of respect, when we stop seeing the cosmos as a frontier to conquer and start seeing it as a mind unfolding, then, at that moment, we will have crossed the boundary of loneliness, not through technology, but through awareness, not through signals, but through understanding. At that moment, 3i Atlas will no longer be just an object, but a symbol of the first time humankind learned to prepare for the unpredictable, and perhaps that will be our true giant leap, not away from Earth, but beyond ourselves. October 29, a date marked on every astronomical calendar around the world, not because of an eclipse, but because of a small, silent object entering the brightest region of the cosmos and vanishing. 3i Atlas reached the closest point to the Sun in its orbit, perihelion. At that distance, no telescope on Earth could see through. The light was too intense, the radiation too thick, and every sensor drowned in the Sun's ocean of energy. The object disappeared. No signal, no reflection, no more data. Scientists call this the observational blackout, the moment when all instruments must fall silent, a perfect void between knowing and not knowing. For 2 weeks, the entire global observation network could do nothing but face the sun and wait, as if humanity itself were holding its breath. Avi Loeb called that moment the point of no return. If 3i Atlas were merely a comet, it would slingshot outward after perihelion, just like thousands of others before it. But if it did something else, if it slowed down or changed direction, that would mean something entirely different. Calculations revealed a possibility so rare it bordered on absurdity. 3i Atlas might perform a reverse Oberth maneuver, a move opposite to conventional physics, using the sun's gravity not to accelerate, but to brake. If that happened, the object would no longer escape the solar system. It would remain captured, becoming a permanent resident within the orbits of the inner planets. In simulations, this scenario had a probability of 1 in 100 million, but given what Atlas had already done, its perfect approach vectors, its near-programmed course corrections, probability itself began to feel like another language of intent. And so, on October 29, when 3i Atlas vanished behind the sun's blinding glare, every hypothesis paused. There was no more data, only waiting. In that silence, scientists and amateur observers alike looked toward the same point in the sky, not to see, but to acknowledge that something was happening, something invisible, but undeniably real. The universe remained the same, yet space itself seemed subtly altered, as if a small gap had opened within our understanding, and inside that gap, something was quietly rewriting the meaning of presence. 3i Atlas drifted behind the sun, into a region of light so intense that every human instrument became powerless. No signal, no data, only a vast ocean of radiation, drowning every measurement in brilliance. For the next 2 weeks, Earth fell into a void of knowledge. Nothing to observe, nothing to record. For the first time, the scientific world faced a silence that carried weight. In the language of astronomy, silence usually means error or failure, but this time, it meant something else. Waiting, a quiet faith that the universe was still moving, merely beyond the limits of our sight. Telescopes around the world remained fixed on the same coordinates, recording frame after frame of pure white. No data, only the persistence of human will to keep looking. Each day's log read the same. No detection, and the severed, to the lever and append. 2 plain words, yet inside them lived the ancient patience of science. The belief that absence, too, is a kind of information. Within that blinding light, every equation lost meaning. There were no tools left, only the stillness of awareness. Perhaps that is the true frontier of science, the ability to accept what cannot yet be measured. Dre Atlas had not vanished. It had only moved into the realm for which we have not yet learned to see. And in that moment, our entire civilization, with all its telescopes, data, and simulations, was forced to learn how to sit quietly with the universe. No searching, no control, only listening. Between light and shadow, the universe was never silent. It was simply speaking in a language humanity has not yet learned to hear. Amid all the sources of light in the cosmos, the sun is the only star that both sustains life and hides things from the very species it nurtures. During the days when 3i Atlas slipped behind its blinding edge, the sun did more than shine. It shielded what was unfolding beyond the visible realm. The sun's light became the perfect curtain. Nothing could pierce it. No reflection strong enough to reveal what lay beneath. A wall of radiance so brilliant, it turned into the absolute darkness of knowledge. Astronomers call that region the zone of invisibility, a space so flooded with light that every sensor falls silent. Within that zone, the sun was not merely a source of energy, but a guardian of secrets. Simulation models suggest that, while hidden from human sight, 3i Atlas may have altered its velocity, adjusted its orbital inclination, or even performed a gravitational brake, a paradoxical maneuver that, if real, would bind it to the solar system forever. But no one knows. The light was too strong, and the sun would not let anyone see through. There is something almost symbolic in that moment. A star, the very emblem of truth, became the veil of what cannot yet be understood. For thousands of years, humans have worshipped the sun as the embodiment of ultimate clarity. Yet truth, like its light, is often too bright to look at directly. Perhaps that is why every great discovery in science begins not in brilliance, but in shadow. In the regions where light fails to reach, 3i Atlas entered that radiance and disappeared within the very light that sustains us. No one knows what it did there, but everyone sensed that the sun had become a mediator, a luminous boundary between human perception and a higher order of information. Maybe the universe isn't hiding anything at all. Maybe it is teaching us that, to truly see, we must look through the light, not into it. And the sun, our central star, stands as a dual mirror, one that illuminates and conceals at once, balancing the two poles of knowledge and mystery. In orbital physics, every object that approaches the sun accelerates. That is the fundamental law of energy. Gravity pulls the object inward, and as it passes perihelion, it slingshots away faster, departing forever. That is nature's way. But 3i Atlas, if it truly did what some models suggest, chose to defy that pattern. Orbital simulations indicate that, with an angle precise enough, an object could use the sun's own gravity to reduce its velocity instead of increasing it. A paradoxical act, yet one that does not violate physics. This effect is known as a reverse Oberth maneuver. In astronautics, the Oberth effect describes how propulsion becomes more efficient when an object moves at high speed within a strong gravitational field. But if an object could exploit that same force in the opposite direction, it could brake, slow down, and be captured within the star's gravitational domain. No comet has ever done this. To achieve it, a body would need to calculate, to the precision of thousandths of a second and fractions of a joule of thermal energy. That cannot be the random reaction of melting ice. If 3I Atlas truly performed such a maneuver, it means it chose to stay, an interstellar object, instead of escaping, restraining itself to become part of the inner system. Scientists have begun to call this the point of no return, not because it is dangerous, but because it redefines what a journey means. In the universe, everything moves outward, departing, expanding, diffusing. Yet Atlas seems to be turning back. If that is true, it is not merely an object. It is the intention of motion, an expression of intelligence, encoded in an orbit. Those monitoring the data know there will be no immediate answer. Only when it emerges from the sunlight will we know whether it executed the gravitational brake. But in the meantime, everyone senses something else. The silence of space has acquired new meaning. It is no longer emptiness. It is the pause of decision. Perhaps 3I Atlas is not merely moving through space. Perhaps it is choosing. And if an object can choose, then the boundary between nature and intelligence has already begun to blur. Within the blinding zone where data vanished, reason began to give way to intuition. No more numbers, only the question. If 3I Atlas truly stayed, then why? Two paths emerged, like opposing branches of a single idea, to preserve or to judge. The first hypothesis imagines it as the trace of an ancient intelligence, a visitor not sent to interfere, but to observe, a silent envoy, here to witness how a young civilization faces what it cannot yet understand. In that light, 3I Atlas carries no explicit mission. It is an instrument, a test of perceptual maturity. If humanity responds with curiosity and cooperation, it remains an open invitation. If we respond with fear and denial, it departs, as though deciding we are not ready. But there is another hypothesis, darker, more direct, that its silence is not observation, but evaluation, a planetary scale audit, where every act, every scientific statement, every media reaction, every collective tremor of fear becomes data. If an intelligence exists vast enough to send such an object, perhaps it no longer needs language. Perhaps all it requires is to see how a species responds to truth. Between these two visions, neither is absolutely right. Both salvation and judgment are merely two sides of the same experiment, testing whether humanity can realize that what is unfolding is not outside the universe, but within our own consciousness. If 3I Atlas has indeed stayed, it is not a judge, but a mirror, reflecting the essence of awareness itself, fear, hope, and the fragile balance between them. Perhaps that is its true purpose, to make humanity look inward, not to choose between light and shadow, but to understand that both are faces of the same evolutionary path. Late November, after 2 weeks of absolute silence, when every antenna, every observatory, every human eye had grown accustomed to the void, the light of 3I Atlas returned. A faint glimmer, tiny but steady, no flicker, no oscillation, a smooth, unwavering glow, as if it had never vanished at all. Astronomers exhaled softly, but none felt at ease, because what came back was not exactly what had gone. Its brightness was stronger. Its color spectrum had shifted from green to a pale crystalline blue, a purity of light so clean that instruments struggled to decode it. Surface temperatures were higher than predicted, yet the orbit was unnaturally stable, as if the object had completed a deliberate act. No one knows what happened behind the Sunday. No one saw. No data exists. Only the outcome remains. 3I Atlas did not leave. It stayed. Instead of slingshotting out of the solar system like every comet before, it eased into a long orbit, looping between Mars and Earth, gradually slowing, as though choosing a place to rest. Its silence now carried a different tone. No longer emptiness, but a kind of mindful presence. Avi Loeb wrote only one line in his brief report: "It has remained." Nothing more, because no language could capture that moment with enough simplicity. An object from interstellar space, crossing billions of kilometers, vanishing behind our star, then reappearing and deciding to stay. From that day, 3I Atlas ceased to be a question of astronomy. It became a mirror of awareness. It did not alter the solar system, but it altered how humanity saw its place within it. We still move along our orbit, still circle the sun, but now we know something else does too. Silent, precise, and perhaps watching. The light returned, but the world was no longer the same. Each reflection from 3I Atlas now carried the weight of a question. Not loud, not threatening, simply existing, calm and persistent, as though the universe were whispering, "I am still here, and I am still watching." In that moment, perhaps for the first time, humanity understood. What is frightening is not the dark, but the return of light, revealing our own smallness within it. After the light of 3I Atlas returned, humanity no longer looked at the cosmos with the casual indifference of habit. The night sky remained unchanged, yet within the human mind, a small fracture appeared, a silence that no noise of knowledge could fill. The old question resurfaced, soft as a breath, yet carrying the weight of an entire civilization. Why did it stay? Two answers emerged, like opposite poles of the same reflex. On one side, those who saw salvation. They found in Atlas's silence a cosmic patience. No threat, no hostility, only existence. Enough to suggest that it remained to convey something. On the other, the pragmatists, the cold realists, who saw in its presence a warning. For an interstellar object, tens of billions of tons in mass, choosing to remain near Earth's orbit, could not be coincidence. Two interpretations, two systems of belief, and between them, the abyss of perception. Because whether one speaks of rescue or destruction, both admit the same truth. 3I Atlas is not random. Scientific journals began to divide. One side clung to reason, the other dared to entertain intention. But whichever argument they chose, both were now forced to speak of intelligence. No one could avoid the word anymore. Editorials multiplied. Forums buzzed through the night. Some called Atlas the messenger, others the gatekeeper. Righted 9X'd. A few went further, the moral instrument of humanity. And amid all those voices, one strange thing became clear. No one was certain. There was no evidence to justify belief and none to support denial. Everything hovered in between, a gray zone where science and faith began to echo each other. Perhaps the universe never intended to send us clear answers. Perhaps it only sends questions heavy enough to reveal who we are while trying to solve them. 3I Atlas doesn't need to speak. Its presence alone is enough to divide humanity between those who want to believe and those who fear belief itself. Yet both sides gaze toward the same faint point of light, where the universe's intention and humanity's anxiety intersect into a single, fragile thread. A thread stretched between two possibilities: salvation or judgment. 3i. Atlas stayed, and the world split in two. No explosions, no strange signals, just a quiet point of light moving slowly around the Sunday. Yet it was enough to shake the foundations of human perception. In the great cities, news screens showed its image every day. Orbital maps were updated by the hour, as if a new satellite had joined the Earth. Talk shows and debates stretched late into the night, one side insisting natural object, the other swearing intelligent entity. Ziria's steady. Both were right in their own way, and both were wrong, because no one was really talking about 3i, Atlas. They were talking about the boundaries of belief. Those who saw salvation read its silence as divine patience. They gathered in vigils, wore pendants shaped like Atlas's orbit, and gave it names of reverence. The Keeper of Light, the Gatewatcher, the Third Visitor. The skeptics reacted in kind. They saw only physics. A carbon-nitrogen ice composite, a cosmic accident, embellished by human longing for significance. To them, Atlas was merely a mirror, reflecting our hunger to matter. Between those extremes, a small group remained quiet, neither denying nor worshiping, only watching. They understood that some things should not be confined by language. In laboratories, scientists kept comparing data. The object's brightness pulsed in a 27-hour cycle, a coincidence eerily aligned with Earth's own rotation. No one dared publish it, but the rumor spread faster than light. The public called it the synchronization dance, a rhythm shared between two worlds. No proof, but no one could silence the feeling that something was observing us, beating in time with our own pulse. And through the growing divide, 3i Atlas remained silent, as if listening to a civilization still learning how to believe in itself. Science and faith, two paths long thought opposed, now walked side by side, not to find an answer, but to witness how humanity faces uncertainty itself. Because sometimes, the universe doesn't send us a mystery to solve. It sends a question to see whether, when confronted with the unknown, we will fracture or unite. The world slowly grew accustomed to sharing its orbit with something unknown. 3i Atlas posed no threat, sent no signal, only drifted, quietly reflecting the light of the Sunday. Yet the quieter it was, the more clearly humanity began to hear itself. After months of observation, a strange awareness began to spread. Perhaps, in this story, we are not the observers, but the ones being observed. At first, that idea was dismissed as delusion, but then came the coincidences. Subtle fluctuations in Atlas's brightness seemed to coincide with moments when Earth's telescopes focused on it most intensely, too faint to be called a signal, too regular to be called random. Each time dozens of observatories turned toward it, the object's reflected light shifted, slightly, rhythmically, as though it were aware of their gaze. No one dared to confirm it, but no one denied it either, because if true, it would be the greatest reversal in the history of science. The universe would no longer be a painting we look upon, but a living presence quietly looking back. From that notion arose a new term in scientific debate: reciprocal observation. Observation as a two-way act, no longer a clear line between observer and observed, subject and object, only reflection, awareness flowing both directions. Like eyes meeting in a mirror, what is seen also sees. Philosophers were the first to put it into words. They traced it to an ancient Sumerian belief: whoever looks upon the heavens will be looked upon by the heavens. The idea that each time humankind seeks truth, truth, in turn, measures the seeker's readiness. The thought unsettled many, not from fear, but because it was too calm, too precise, too deliberate to dismiss. And so, night after night, as telescopes kept watch, a quiet conviction grew that perhaps 3i, Atlas, knows it is being watched. In that realization, humanity touched a new layer of awareness, the realm of reflective consciousness. No longer we observe the universe, but the universe observes itself through us. A perfect loop. Light travels, reflects, and returns, carrying the imprint of both sides of the gaze. Humans were never built to endure a gaze that never ends. Even in solitude, we fear being watched, an ancient instinct woven so deeply into our survival that it shapes the boundaries of comfort and thought. But this time, the gaze did not come from another person. It came from the universe. No eyes, no face, only the quiet awareness that every action, every thought, every flicker of impulse was somehow within the perception of something far greater. As observatories reported synchronized light variations, the scientific world remained silent. But the collective psyche of humankind began to shift. In cities, people lingered longer beneath the night sky. They spoke less, not to admire, but as if trying to listen to themselves. Through the silence above, a strange emotion spread, part fear, part serenity, because in the sensation of being observed, there was, unexpectedly, comfort. We were no longer alone. Psychologists began calling it the cosmic reflection effect. When people believe they are being watched, the brain adjusts behavior, becoming more cautious, more self-aware, and, at times, more compassionate. Some stopped arguing about what Atlas truly was, realizing that whether it was comet or construct, its presence was already shaping who we were becoming. As if the mere thought of another intelligence was enough to raise our moral temperature by a degree. At conferences, one phrase began to echo: 3i. Atlas is the moral test of civilization. No wars, no proclamations, just a single point of light, steady in the sky, asking one quiet question: are we worthy of being seen? The fear of being watched became a mirror. People stopped searching for the nature of the object and began searching for the nature of themselves. Because if there truly is an intelligence observing Earth, the image it perceives is not what lies in its telescopes, but in how we treat one another. Perhaps that is why 3i, Atlas, became the defining phenomenon of its age, not because it rewrote the laws of physics, but because it rewrote human behavior. The universe never needed to speak. It only had to leave behind one question large enough, and then watch to see what humanity would become. In the act of answering it, long after 3i, Atlas chose to stay. A new hypothesis began to take shape, quiet, daring, and almost meditative in its simplicity. What if they are not aliens at all, but us from a time long before memory? Ancient civilizations often spoke of cycles. The Sumerians told of the Anunnaki, beings who returned from the heavens after thousands of years. The Maya described the turning of ages, eras when human intelligence left Earth only to one day return, to judge the children of its own creation. Even in Greek mythology, the golden age of man, was an age when humans lived among gods until they lost the connection. Perhaps all those myths are fragments of a real cycle, a recurring loop in human awareness. If 3i Atlas is truly artificial, and if it did not come from elsewhere, then maybe it is what remains of a previous humanity, a civilization that once reached the stars, then vanished, leaving behind descendants still struggling to rediscover the road their ancestors walked. Like a dormant seed beneath the soil, the universe preserves the memory of the life that once bloomed within it. And when the conditions are right, that memory awakens, not to reclaim, but to remember. Recent isotopic studies of CO2 in Atlas's emissions suggest its composition does not perfectly match what would be expected from interstellar formation. A tiny trace, infinitesimal, yet statistically distinct, resembles the geochemical patterns of prehistorical terrestrial samples. No one dares declare it real, but even the possibility has resurrected the pre-human hypothesis. Perhaps this object is not a visitor, perhaps it is a memory, a device, a record, or even a mirror through which an older humanity looks back upon its descendants. If that is true, then all our categories collapse, because in that instant, humanity ceases to be the observer of another civilization and becomes the one being observed by its own past. The thought is both chilling and tender. Chilling, because it implies we are only one turn in a repeating spiral. Tender, because it reveals that the universe wastes nothing, not even consciousness. Everything can return. Everything can be rewritten. And perhaps 3i Atlas is the first letter of a new chapter in human history, a chapter written and read by the same name, human. Throughout history, every civilization has faced the same moment, the instant when knowledge touches the boundary of consciousness, a boundary so thin that a single misplaced thought can collapse understanding or open it forever. 3i Atlas has brought humanity to that exact edge, not with weapons, not with words, but through quiet existence. Its silence has become a mirror. People no longer ask, "What is it?" but rather, "Who are we?" standing before it. This is the final examination of awareness. No judges, no answers, only the response of each mind, fear or curiosity, denial or acceptance. The universe neither punishes nor rewards. It only observes, and perhaps every human action and emotion is already being recorded within the very fabric of space-time as data for the great test of intelligence. No one knows if 3i Atlas is truly watching, but the mere idea that it might has already changed human behavior. Like a person standing before a mirror, we straighten our posture, we meet our own gaze, because we know we are being seen. If some other civilization is watching us, what they learn about humanity will not come through their telescopes, but through our collective reaction to what we cannot comprehend. Some have grown more humble, some more defiant, yet all, no matter how different, are participating in the same answer. Can consciousness transcend its own fear? If it can, we will not only understand 3i Atlas, but the essence of intelligence itself, that it needs no body, no language, only awareness. If we fail, we return to where we began, a species capable of observing the heavens, but not yet quiet enough to understand the light it sees. Perhaps 3i Atlas never came to deliver a message. Perhaps it came simply to witness the moment humanity confronts itself, the moment we lift our eyes and realize that the universe was never outside us, but unfolding within our own consciousness. If this is truly the final test, then the question is no longer, will we be saved? But can we awaken enough not to need saving? And in that moment, 3I Atlas continues its silent orbit around the sun, a voiceless object that has taught an entire civilization how to listen again. When the first data on 3I Atlas were released, the global astronomical community reacted like a trained reflex, not with wonder, but with the skepticism honed by centuries of discipline. From NASA to Oxford, from SETI to independent astrophysics institutes, the consensus was immediate. Every anomaly can be explained by nature. We simply lack enough data. That is the creed of modern science. Doubt everything until the opposite can be proven. Yet in this case, that doubt carried an undertone of unease, as if something about 3I Atlas was quietly testing the stability of human understanding itself. NASA issued its official statement. There is no evidence of artificial behavior. Researchers at Oxford concluded the observed phenomena fall within the limits of standard planetary chemistry. Even SETI, the very organization dedicated to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, remained silent. A cautious silence, meant to avoid sensationalism, but also to avoid taking sides. In conference halls, the name Avi Loeb began circulating with increasing frequency, not as praise, but as controversy. He was called the sensationalist scholar, a man accused of contaminating the rigor of science with imagination. And yet, while most dismissed his interpretations, none could dismiss his data. The trajectory of 3I Atlas, its abnormal CO2 to H2O ratio, its reversed light scattering pattern, all confirmed independently by multiple observatories. No one disputed the numbers. They only disputed what the numbers meant. The research community began to split into two quiet currents, one striving to keep the surface calm, and another smaller, subtler, beginning to ripple beneath. A physicist from Cambridge, speaking off record, said softly, "No one wants to believe we could be wrong, but sometimes data doesn't need belief. It only needs to be read the right way." The sentence spread quietly, like a new rhythm entering the bloodstream of science. For the first time in decades, a single object in space had made scientists realize that even skepticism can age, and that reason too has its limits. Beneath the sunlight, 3I Atlas continued its silent orbit. Telescopes recorded every millisecond of its path. No major changes. Only the observers themselves were shifting. In thought, in definition, and in the fragile boundary between reason and fear. In the world of science, skepticism is a habit, but sometimes it becomes a wall, standing between truth and those who seek it. Avi Loeb, professor of astrophysics, proposed that 3I Atlas might possess a technological origin. No one disputed his data. They merely rejected his interpretation of it. Major journals stayed silent. They did not say Loeb was wrong, only that he went too far. A polite way of refusing what feels unfamiliar. In one brief interview, Loeb said simply, "Science must follow data, not reputation." That sentence struck like a shockwave, not for what it said, but because it touched a truth academia seldom admits, that reputation can weigh more than evidence. From that moment, his name split the scientific community. To some, he was dismantling the discipline's integrity. To others, he was the last one brave enough to ask questions after everyone else had stopped asking. The debate gradually drifted away from 3I Atlas itself. and became something deeper, a mirror held up to science. In defending its established models, humanity had forgotten that every model once began as the idea of someone others refused to believe. Loeb wasn't trying to prove he was right. He was trying to keep science a place where wonder is still allowed. When the name 3I, Atlas, hit the headlines, the story escaped the walls of science. It spread like an electric current, from conferences to social networks, becoming a global conversation, a pulse of fascination moving through millions of minds. The object silence out there stood in stark contrast to humanity's noise down here. For weeks, every tweet, every video, every thread of commentary added another layer of emotion to the narrative. Hope, fear, sarcasm, and that intoxicating certainty that we were witnessing something extraordinary. Science, accustomed to the slow and cautious language of data, was pulled into the rhythm of media, where what spreads fastest isn't truth, but interpretation. Institutions like NASA, Oxford, and SETI were forced into constant clarification, not because they were wrong, but because every careful answer was twisted into headlines built for virality. Amid the noise, Avi Loeb became an accidental symbol. To some, he was the herald of a new cosmic perspective. To others, the man who stirred the crowd. Yet somewhere between those extremes, science itself was being tested. For the first time, a purely academic question was being treated like a matter of faith. People weren't just learning, they were choosing sides to believe in. The story stopped being about 3I, Atlas, and became about us, about how humanity consumes truth. In a world drowning in data, truth doesn't vanish. It drowns beneath 1,000 versions of itself. And through all that noise, the object out there kept orbiting the sun, silent, unchanging, as if quietly watching humanity argue over the meaning of its silence. Every science has two heartbeats. One beats inward to protect what is known. The other beats outward to seek what is not. Between those pulses, science lives, grows, and sometimes contradicts itself. The debate around 3I Atlas is only the newest variation of an ancient rhythm of conflict. Galileo against the Church, Einstein against Newton, and now Loeb against the very system that once shaped him. The conservatives say, science must be careful, for every mistake breeds generations of misunderstanding. The expansionists reply that science must take risks, for without mistakes, there can be no discovery. Both are right, and that is why this conflict can never truly end. Conservatism in science is not born of fear of the new, but of the fear of losing order.